So welcome everyone to Ecopsychology Voices, an interview series with some of ecopsychology's luminaries. Hello, my name is Carol Koziel, and I'm the founder of the Canadian Ecopsychology Network. The host of this series, Linda Bazal, and I co-created this program. Today, it is our distinct privilege to hear the voice of Joanna Macy in conversation with Rebekah Hart. We'll also hear the voice of Andy Fisher, reflecting on how Joanna has influenced the field of ecopsychology. And we'll wrap up the hour with answering some questions that have emerged from the voices of you, the participants in this audience. So, first, our guest facilitator today is Rebekah Hart, who is based in Montreal. Rebekah is a couple and family therapist, a psychotherapist, a creative arts therapist, a Work That Reconnects Facilitator, a decades-long devoted student and friend of Joanna Macy's, and a new mother. Welcome, Joanna, Andy, and Rebekah. Thank you so much for your time and wisdom. And Rebekah, the airwaves are yours.
Thank you so much, Carol. It's an honor to be here. And I just want to welcome everyone from around the world. I'm calling here from Jojage, which is the island of Montreal, here, Iroquois traditional territory, and calling out to Joanna, who's in Ohlone traditional territory. Those Indigenous stewards of our land who continue to take care of this land that we're lucky to be on. And I also just want to start with a very personal note, sharing very briefly a little bit about myself and the way I met Joanna. When I was a teenager, which is about 20 years ago plus, I went through a big awakening about the state of the world and a lot of despair about what was happening to our world. And it took several years of piecing together different teachings and different approaches. And I was looking for a way to address the despair that I felt and help others with that. And when I found Joanna's book, World as Lover, World as Self, I remember every time I opened a chapter, I would just begin to weep because it spoke so deeply to me and to all these different streams of thought I had been together. And here Joanna was articulating these insights so beautifully and offering a really concrete way of working with people. And so I guess I was about 20. I signed up for my first workshop with Joanna, and I've been deeply grateful for her influence in my life. She's been a wonderful role model, and I think her work speaks to the essence of the questions that we face as a society today and the dharma of our time. So I'm very honored to be here with you all and to be with Joanna today. So welcome, everyone, and welcome, Joanna.
Oh, I'm so delighted to be here with you, dear.
I guess this first part, we're just going to begin, well, with the gratitude. I'm grateful for you being here, Joanna, and I don't know if there's anything you want to share as we open with gratitude.
Well, I would like to just, what was in my mind just now is that I think for all of us, nearly 200, I understand, gathering here, is that this moment is, in some reason, why we found our way to ecopsychology, or the work that reconnects, the interests that bring us together are the key questions facing the human heart-mind at this particular historical moment. As each day dawns here in the West Coast, right on the Pacific, outside San Francisco Bay, right there, it seems it couldn't get worse in terms of human suffering and human folly. And the folly almost exceeds the suffering because it holds up suffering to come. And it's very hard for an American of the United States to behold this, because there's a sense of humiliation and responsibility that sucks the spirit down, or inflames, or makes you mad as hell. I think that being mad as hell is much more useful. So this is a wonderful, wonderful time we're facing. We're privileged. We're privileged, I think, to be here at this historical moment. And we're privileged right now, this morning, or whatever time it is for you folks, together. It makes it's like a holy moment.
Thank you. It brings up a question for me around, the work that reconnects, for those familiar with it, always begins with gratitude. And yet what we're facing is so horrific and devastating right now. I guess you've often said that gratitude is not dependent on external circumstances.
Yeah.
And I think that takes a lot of wisdom to be able to apply. But I wonder if you can talk about how you put that into practice as external circumstances are worsening.
Yeah.
And we're experiencing such trauma, such grief as a society and individual.
This moment, because this moment insists on our actualizing in the best way we can everything we've ever learned about courage and interconnectedness. It's the moment of truth for the human race. And if I were somewhere on the rims of the circle of time, and I knew that this moment was coming, when humanity as a whole, in a planetary way, would be facing whether or not conscious life forms, complex life forms, complex enough for consciousness, were endangered. That at this evolutionary point, because it depends whether life continues, complex life forms continues, depend on our responses now. I never thought that would happen in my lifetime. And you know what? I am so glad to be here. Now frankly, who would want to miss this? Who of us who cares about drama, cares about excitement, cares about being of use? Would you really want to miss this? Come on. And so I know what my answer is. And sometimes I've said that I can imagine out there in the universe, using the Buddhist metaphor of the Buddha fields of consciousness elsewhere in the universe, that I've imagined that people are lining up to take an incarnation on Earth, planet Earth at this time, because this is where you show who you are, and this is where you show who you are, and get a chance to be useful.
Well, it's a wonderful perceptual shift. And I wonder about, you know, concretely, like what I feel the work that reconnects gives us is this incredible roadmap and set of tools around actually how do we apply that gratitude and that what you talk about in the book, A Wild Love for the World. And if anyone hasn't read it, this is Joanna's latest book. It's A Wild Love for the World and the Work of Our Time, Joanna Macy and the Work of Our Time. It's a beautiful collection. And you talk about that essential question that has marked your whole life around how can you be truly present in times like these. And I guess the work that reconnects is an application of that. It is a practice. And so I wonder about if you could talk more about those concrete ways that we can, how can we be present with this that we face right now?
Yeah. Well, this work began 40 years ago. 4 decades of it I've had the good luck to have, and it began in a dark night of the soul. It lasted, 15 months, almost a year and a half for me, after I realized at a Cousteau Society symposium that we had the capacity to, and were on our way, we humans, to destroying our world. And then knowing humans, if we can, we will. Tends to be, if we can make nuclear bombs, we will. You know, that there's that's a little challenging part of our makeup, and we'll test the limits. So it's been, the work has gazed into, like gazing at the face of Medusa and not turning to stone. Too many of us are turned to stone, or into denial, or into insane distractions, or like getting rich, or seeing how many multiple billionaires you can become, or how many nuclear warheads you can make, or and that this to be with this, and it's and so the work that reconnects helps us be absolutely honest. And people that from the beginning would come and almost weep with gratitude to be able to speak their darkest thoughts and their gut-wrenching fears, and not hide them. Because certainly in my own country, there's the competent person smiles a lot. We put smiley faces all over everything. And to admit to being in grief and outrage. And so I would say those who do a lot of grief work, that isn't enough. I think you need to be able to allow yourself and everything to enjoy their anger as well, and the outrage, and their sense of depletion, and their fear, and their dread. And so what we discovered right almost at the beginning was that when we face what we are afraid to experience and really share, we see that it's shared. Phew, I'm not the only one. Of course, that means you fall instantly in love with everybody you're working with. And then you discover that does not come from craziness or neurosis or death wish or any, it comes from caring. And that caring derives directly from our mutual belonging. We belong to each other. We belong to this earth. So this has been, and you who've done so much of this work with me, dear Hart, dear Rebekah Hart. And anyway, that you have experienced this with me over and over again, seeing the love and solidarity that happen when people find that which they had tried to mask or cure of their grief or outrage, it turns into a mutual regard and trust. And I said, oh, and here are people I can really be honest with. And this is what this planetary moment needs. We see more, yeah.
Yeah. It's like a homecoming you talk about. I remember you've said over the years how you were almost surprised in the early days of the work that reconnects at this truth telling in groups, which I've witnessed many times too. It seems to engender a kind of perceptual shift about the self as well.
Oh, and that has been, yeah, that to me is key. I'm so glad you mentioned that. Because we have, all of us are suffering from 5 centuries of acute hyper individualism. And we have been trained and conditioned to see ourselves as separate and competitive. And it's got its tentacles into us. It's hard to believe otherwise. And it's such a release. And it's like walking out of a prison cell of the separate ego. Phew. So a lot of the questions even that people have gathered here, you will find that my response to them, it has to do with the getting liberated from separateness and competitiveness.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Like as a psychotherapist, you know, our profession was developed really in the dyadic form, you know, the therapist and the client. And there is such a thing as group therapy, which I think is very important. But when I think about the field of ecopsychology, also, I think that the group process is so essential. You know, you're talking about shifting of norms, of social norms, and of the waking up to the fact that we're not alone. And when we do that together, because what we're facing is so huge, it's so collective, it wakes us up in a different way. I've often thought that the collective group aspect of the work is very important.
Yeah. And it's that solidarity that can carry us through. But it's been very easy to fall in love with the people in the work. That's because in the release of getting out of that isolation chamber of the separate competitive ego, it's very easy to just fall in love with whoever is at hand, who's ever with you on that journey. Because Eros, our world needs Eros, that erotic charge. We're going insane with the need, our power holders, with the need to cause and create divisions. It's reached such madness in my own country at the top. Yeah.
When we were speaking the other day, Joanna, you were talking about breath and the practice of breathing with, and the theme of breath right now in our world. Do you want to talk a
Yeah.
little bit about
Oh, yes. And this becomes daily more important to me. You know, the words cried out by George Floyd as the policeman had his knee on his neck, "I can't breathe," which were echoing an earlier Eric Garner, who also was killed by a policeman in Staten Island, and how this inflamed the people, especially Black people, but also people of all brown and white and red, that they can't breathe, can't breathe. And so that was said and worn and on signs and on T-shirts and uh, and I'm a beloved friend of mine just choked to death with COVID-19 because of the chaos in San Quentin State Prison, where he was locked up, and he couldn't get to the ventilator in time. But while he was still alive, he lived for a good 10 days. I would breathe with him to entrain the breathing. And then I felt, as I was breathing with this beloved one, that I was breathing with everyone down in the Amazon. These lungs of the earth that were emitting oxygen over the millennia for us are burning now, and they're choking people, and the people are dying of COVID too, who should be the guardians of the Amazon. And the smoke that's been here in the Bay Area, and so I found myself after my beloved friend died, that I was doing this with our world, and that this seemed to be such a wonderful way to experience my interbeing with all things, especially since this mindfulness of breathing in and breathing out is the first meditation the Lord Buddha taught. It was what he did under the Bodhi tree. This was the basic meditative practice. And here we are around the world, and here we are sitting in a circle that goes from, the far east to the far south. And we're breathing together. And what a beautiful meditative practice. And it helps me know that I'm in part of a larger self. Just as we're breathing together now, that we are the voice and we are the hands of a larger self, a planetary kind of being, as is our planet, which is living, our Gaia. We are breathing her, she's breathing through us. And as we work in whatever ways have chosen us, whatever ways the planet chooses to work through us, it's like that power flows through us, It's sort of a way of experiencing that it's more than our own separate breath, and it's more than our own separate smarts and our own separate little bundle of energy. It's this, we make a larger awareness.
it? It's a helpful practice, and of course there's a beautiful exercise in the Work That Reconnects and breathing with that I encourage people to take a look at. an adaptation of the Tonglen practice, breathing in suffering and breathing out compassion. I guess we should, we'll move on soon to the next portion of this event, but the last question I had for you is about the Great Turning. And the Great Turning is a term that's used in the Work That Reconnects
Yeah.
to talk about the revolution of art. And I'm curious about, you know, how your relationship or understanding of the Great Turning has changed, in particular right now in this time of what you name as societal collapse.
The Great Turning was a phrase that came up to represent that our great desire and motivation and actions to build a life-sustaining civilization or culture. And so for years, many of us imagined we could reach this without requiring the collapse of the industrial growth economy or global capitalism. But now it is clear with the devastation of climate change and the pandemic and the economic effects of it, that this collapse of the industrial growth madness will happen. It's happening now, and the pandemic is making sure of that. So then, what happens to the Great Turning? The Great Turning is inside us, is our motivation. The Great Turning is in process now. It's real. It's motivating us. It's motivating this very gathering we're doing and the work that so many people are doing. But it's in us as a compass and as a lens. It's in us like the Buddhist term bodhicitta, which means the motivation to serve everyone.
And so that's an adjustment from the, achieving a certain vision, right, that we hope to achieve in a certain form versus acceptance. You talk about accepting what is and yet still having active hope, having a way in which we're moving towards what we wish for.
So as my co-author of Active Hope, Chris Johnstone says, Great Turning becomes turning up. So you turn up to face what's happening. That's all that's here. And then it's turning toward, and which is turning toward what's to be done right now and is right at hand. And it's also a turning away from that which is destructive to the web of life.
Beautiful.
Net of life, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So I think we should move on to the next portion of our time, unless there's anything else you want to add, Joanna. Is there anything?
Well, I just was thinking that because I was in conversation with Chris, we're building a wonderful new second edition of Active Hope, and that he was comparing this turning away from the 4 R's of Jem Bendel and the deep adaptation work. And so I just want to toss out that I have found, as many of you, I'm imagining, that the thinking of Jem Bendel, who brought us deep adaptation work, and that character of very honestly facing where we are and what's happening has been very helpful, and that includes this turning away or relinquishing. This is a time not only where we face what's happening, that we not only bring what we are, but we learn to let go of what's not working. We don't have to be, we're not wind up toys that we have to keep on marching to that profit-making to in this situation. We can enjoy our evolutionary capacities.
Yeah, thank you. That's beautiful. I'm just remembering there was one other little question I had, maybe we could answer very briefly, is, you know, the work that reconnects is also so full of the power of our imaginations, and particularly in work with imagining the future and the future beings, and how they would be supporting our work in the Great Turning right now. And I guess I'm curious if you've kind of checked in with the future beings lately, and if you have, what do you have a sense the future would be telling us about the present and about how we act today?
Oh, I'm in love with them. Yeah. It was my work with radioactive waste that we're strewing around the world that made me tune into the future once and help others, so that we would stop doing things that would make it lethal or impossible or more suffering for humans. And found that actually in that work that the future humans and the ancestors too, these beings of the three times, past, present, and future, they can co-inhabit in us. And in a moment of extreme crisis and stress like this, they can become more evident. So watch out. They are going to talk to you in whatever form. It can be through your dreams, or it can be through jokes. Mine tend to have quite a sense of humor. And they, what was it I was about to say? That they will, well, I don't want to waste time, but that they give me staying power and ideas, because they, oh, I know, they say they have things to suggest for us right now. And they have things to say, and they about life going on, and they have things to do. But they don't have a voice of their own, and they don't have hands. So what does that leave? Then it has to be, they have to use our voice, have to use our hands.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that they're great company.
Yeah.
Just try it. Because as a teacher of mine, Rosalie Bertel, a Canadian, world-renowned radiologist and radio scientist of radiation, said, every being who will ever live on Earth is here now. What? Where's that? And then she says, in our ovaries and in our gonads and in our DNA. The future is in us. Don't you doubt it. And so you serve the future, and you're held by the future, and it keeps you from going nuts.
It's beautiful, and it makes me think about you know, the process of birth, and having just gone through the process of birth not long ago myself, but also, you know, that this moment, you know, you've talked about this moment as an evolutionary moment for humanity, a kind of a painful birth canal. We don't know what's going to happen.
That's right. Yeah.
So maybe we'll stop there because I know we could keep talking for a long time, but I want to bring other voices in. Thank you so much, Joanna. And I'll pass on the mic to Carol and Andy.
Thank you, Rebekah and Joanna. And now I'd like to invite Andy Fisher to share some words about Joanna's and the Work That Reconnects influence on the field of eco-psychology. Andy Fisher.
Okay, well, thanks, Carol. And so I won't speak for long. I do want to start by acknowledging I'm sitting on Algonquin, Anishinaabe territory. And I'll just say a few words. It's largely from my own perspective about how Joanna has figured in the field of eco-psychology. And when I was writing my chapter for the book that Rebekah mentioned, the Wild Love for the World book, you know, I started off with, you know, just by saying Joanna seems to be everywhere in eco-psychological circles. And, you know, it's hard to imagine the field without her. And I said that just because it seemed true to me. So I just sort of wanted to start with that. And then I started to sort of trace some of the ways that you, Joanna, you've just been quietly there, you know, in my own thought and practice, kind of the way, you know, Rilke has been there for you in your own work. And, you know, I was a little startled, actually, you know, at the end of the process to discover just how much I'd relied on you for all these years. You know, I discovered your work in the early 1990s, and it's just, you've just been a sort of continuous thread for me. And so, and I think this experience of my own reflects the fact, you know, that you and your work have, you know, embodied so much of what we've intuited or imagined for the field of eco-psychology. You know, even before there was a field of eco-psychology. You mentioned, you know, this started for you 4 decades ago. You know, and I remember reading something you wrote in 1989, and it's a line I return to over and over again. That is, you know, unless you have some roots in a spiritual practice that holds all life sacred and encourages joyful celebration of our, you know, kinship with all our fellow beings, you know, facing the future and its enormous challenges is nearly impossible. You know, and that line, I read it in the early 90s, and it just lives in me, and it's been such an important line to return to for me, as well as other lines, you know, that you've written. And I think, you know, this kind of clear-eyed wisdom, I mean, there's so much of that in the call today, and along with everything else you've written, and all the practice you've introduced, and your willingness, you know, to be angry and to name this, you know, capitalist war machine ripping the planet to pieces. And, you know, I love what you said today about the folly, you know, sort of creating suffering to come, you know, the clarity of your wisdom is just so, such good fuel for the field, and the erotic sensibility that you are adamant about, you know, this wild, beautiful, passionate love for the sensuous earth. And so for me, all of this adds up to a kind of wholeness that I think the field of eco-psychology has actually itself struggled to achieve. You know, integrating the what I call the recollective side and the critical side. You know, I think we've had a hard time as a field doing that. And so, you know, coming from my own perspective, what I would simply say is that you and your work, Joanna, you know, have been a kind of beacon, you know, a beacon for this field, as well as for me personally. And that your work and you know, continue to be that beacon, as I think we saw on the call today. So thank you, Joanna, for the work you've done and for the way you continue to inspire us. And as I say, I just feel so moved by much of what you said today. So you continue to keep me in the game. So thank you. And I'll pass it back to who? Carol, you?
Sure, thank you. Thank you so much, Andy, for articulating Joanna's huge influence on our field. And now I'd like to wind down in the last 15 minutes with the voices from the audience. We had over 50 questions emerge, and Joanna and Rebekah have been able to review some of them. And so, Rebekah, do you have a couple of questions you'd like to have a conversation with Joanna about?
Yeah. So there are a few really, there are many wonderful questions. I've tried to synthesize a few. So one question that comes up from the audience is around how can I feel co-responsible for creating reality around myself without being paralyzed by guilt, shame, and sadness? And then a similar question, in being compassionate, how do I suffer without sadness becoming part of myself? Or how do you keep from getting lost in emotional overwhelm?
So that's, you have to just keep moving so that it's, don't stop with, it's great to have the honesty to experience and to own the grief, the guilt, the shame, the outrage, all of that. But do not stop there, because you have to, and here, this is where Buddhist theory, I mean, Buddhist philosophy as well as practice is very useful. It's a recognition that these are feelings, the shame, the grief, these are feelings. And when we dare to experience them, that's all they want. And then we keep on going. It's our resistance that reifies them and makes us stuck with them. So you just note it, the thing, and you move right on, because feelings are by nature, like everything else, they're impermanent. And so you breathe them in and out, but that you recognize them, you do a little dance or you do a little bow and say, there you are, my outrage. And boy, I have a lot myself. And, but you're not stuck with them. Once you recognize them, you realize that they're very important. And this is a very important recognition, because a lot of people fear in the Western world, certainly down in my country, is that, oh, if I let myself feel my sorrow for the world, I wouldn't be able to get up in the morning. I wouldn't be able to keep a job. I wouldn't be able to. That's a lot of baloney. All you need to do is recognize it, and then once it's recognized, you're free of it, but you know it. You know it in a way, it's enriched by you, or it's given you a message. And then you keep on. So that's, these are not out to grab and master you. They are out to lubricate and inform you and kick you on your way, because they transform naturally. And then this is the other thing to remember, is that these experiences, emotional, dark emotions, actually betray to you, reveal to you the extent of your caring. It's like the ground of a wider sense of self. these are testimonies to the extent of your belonging to Earth, because you are a verb. You are not a noun. You are not a landscape. You are a verb. You are a flow. You are a river. Just keep going and don't get attached to your grief. Just bow to it and say, oh boy, yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised there. You know, I felt you lurking. And then you turn it to its tantric side. So the tantric side of grief, and we actually, in the truth mandala, we act this out with objects. The tantric side or source side of grief is love. You only mourn what you love. Or the tantric side of anger and outrage is passion for justice. So and these are liberating feelings.
It makes me think of an older version of what you called the work that reconnects despair and empowerment work.
Yeah.
And I remember you emphasizing it's not that you just go through despair and you get over it and then you're empowered, but they both coexist alongside each other and they inform each other. Would you say?
And because you never are finished with the despair. You're never finished with the anguish, the pain for the world, because we're in the world. You know, all the people walking up and down the street, they're our brothers and sisters. And we are a family. We're never stop hurting for the injustices visited on each other.
And one of the questions that says is about in being compassionate, how to suffer without sadness becoming part of my own self, makes me think about your definition of compassion, Joanna, in the work.
Give it to me.
Oh, that to feel compassion is evidence of our interconnectedness.
Yeah.
And so that very suffering with and opening our hearts to that is the action that opens us to interbeing and to that perception of we're not alone and we're not separate. We're not separate.
Actually, that's true of all the other feelings that we love with our pain for the world. That's true of our outrage as well.
So maybe we can feel overwhelmed, but at least we belong.
But once you recognize them, you unseat them from their grip or their power over you.
Thank you. So next question. What are the main skills we should give to the next generation of kids being born these days? And coupled with that question is, how do children and teens experience eco-anxiety? So a question in general about young people and the next generation and how to support them.
I love this question. This is because as we attend to their anguish that they are in, or the effect on them of being in a world where they see no future. As we deal with that, we are learning what we need for ourselves as well. That we, so we need to trust them to have the strength to face and then help them to speak and not betray any feelings of that you're scared or overwhelmed by what they're feeling. If they sense that, they're not going to tell you. And what do we want to give the young people? Is what we want to give ourselves to. We want to give them the capacity to pay attention and not to go and distract yourself or numb yourself or drive yourself silly with mind-altering substances. You want to give them a kind of self-respect of, wow, and here some adventure reading, like The Lord of the Rings. When you follow what's happening with Frodo and going into Mordor, these fictions, and there are a number of them, of course, where we love adventure stories, and we've always had them, and they're very useful. I love working with Chris Johnstone on Active Hope because he derives so much guidance from them. These are, you want to measure up, and then you want to be able to make choices. And and I just want to say this: if we can invent ways to help young people feel useful in working within the situation we're in, and stop underestimating their utility and their smarts, they can be put to work. They can help deliver the mail. They can help grow community gardens and learn in the process. So that you have to just sit around inside, of course it's hard with the pandemic, but to find ways that they can take part in something that is bigger than themselves, something that's reflects the wider society and its needs, would be so welcome, I do believe. Oh wait, I've lost you. I don't hear
on
you.
mute. Sorry. Thank you. So another question, maybe our last question. How do you face competing urgencies like Black Lives Matter, collapse of democracy, the many facets of climate change? How do you know what to prioritize to compassionately support movements?
Oh boy, that's a good question, because it's so easy to feel sort of like that proverbial donkey between two different bales of hay. You don't know which one to, you keep turning from one to the other, and you don't end up filling your stomach or having an effect. And I tend to do this too. Oh, I'll do a little bit here. Oh yes, oh, that's so important. So the honoring the feeling that you want to have an effect by concentrating your body, mind, and heart is made easy for you by the realization that the issues at hand now, and they are multiple, all have a common, they all can attack or undermine a common problem, which is that we our separateness and our fears, that we are afraid of each other, that we have to control each other, that we have to get rid of each other, and that the issues that cry out for our attention are issues that have a common thread of caring for each other and for the planet as a home for conscious life. And so you can trust that. So if you want to give your 90% of your free, negotiable time to Black Lives Matter, go to and do it. And others will be doing other aspects. But we have to, for a survivable culture, we have to have a healing of the torment and racist assault on our brothers and sisters. So that has to happen, and if we have to protect the creatures of the sea, so that has to be done. We have to do something about the plastic. That has to be done. We have it. The list is endless, but so are we. There are always organizations on each one of these, and your precious, precious time. So you choose by what you love. What do you feel in your solar plexus, in your heart, or whatever other organ is you're guiding that would give you. So I feel very drawn now in a surprising way after what's happened, as I mentioned, in San Quentin, to give time to abolition of prisons. So it's let your life speak. Let your heart speak in choosing something that will bring you satisfaction and excitement, and that will increase your capacity to love. And do not be surprised by how huge that will grow. That you're made for this. You're made for love. You're made for this time. Otherwise, you wouldn't be on this call. You probably wouldn't even be more now if you weren't.
Thank you so much, Joanna. It's very heartening. And we're gonna wrap up today, but I wanted to invite you to formally close our gathering here, and then I guess we'll pass the word to Carol after that. But to close, often in the Work That Reconnects, we use a dedication or dedicating the merits, which is a Buddhist tradition. So I want to just give you the opportunity to find a way to close our time here of listening. And is there anything you want to say, Joanna?
I was just, what was welling up for me was gratitude for y'all and for this hour that we've just had. And although I've been talking so much, I really felt the presence of everyone else, and I'm so grateful for it. And for you, my dear heart.
Thank you. I'm so grateful as well, and such an honor to be here with you. And may these words inspire and serve the welfare of all beings. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebekah, Joanna, Andy. Joanna's book, A Wild Love for the World, Joanna Macy and the Work of Our Time. Andy Fisher made a contribution chapter in here. But what struck me in the afterword, there is a little paragraph I want to read to close us, and it goes like this. Being fully present to fear, to gratitude, to all that is, this is the practice of mutual belonging. As living members of the living body of Earth, we are grounded in that kind of belonging. We will find more ways to remember, celebrate, and affirm this deep knowing. We belong to each other. We belong to Earth. Even when faced with cataclysmic changes Nothing can ever separate us from her. We are already home. The practice of mutual belonging is the medicine for the sickness of the small self and can accompany us through the hard times again. Thank you, everyone. I'll send an email out with this recording. Take care, stay safe, and get outside. Goodbye.